Hello everyone, this is Nyessa, and welcome to the third and final part of an interview with Edda Wintertongue. I apologize for the delay in getting this out here. Unfortunately, my recording of this last set of questions was interrupted by a rogue sinus infection, but I have stopped sneezing enough that I have been able to finish the recording, so without further ado, here's Edda. The first set of questions today comes from Warrior for Christ, who actually sent in quite a few questions. And the first of those is, who is your favorite companion? Well, the easy answer to this question is to say Garm, but I suppose you're more interested in those companions who walk on two legs. And at this point, I've traveled with a few people. There was Faendal first, but that was very brief. Then Jade, Lydia, Arander, and of course Onumla and Rumarin. Most of them I didn't travel with for very long, and truth be told, even if I am staying in Skyrim, I probably won't again. The exceptions to that, of course, are Onumla and Rumarin, so I suppose it really comes down to just them. And, it's a tough one, but I think I'm going to have to go with Onumla at this point. We don't always get along perfectly. She can be a bit abrasive at times, but I trust her. And I can't really say that about anyone else who I've met in Skyrim so far. The second question seems to be a follow-up to that first one, which is, are you seeking more companionship? If you had asked me this just a couple of weeks ago, I would have said no, because of course I wasn't planning on staying in Skyrim. There wouldn't be any need for more companionship. But with the way things are now, maybe. It would probably be a good idea to seek out more allies if I'm going to do this whole Dragonborn thing. I don't really know who I can trust, but I really ought to start finding that out. And the next question is, do you want fortune, fame, power, and knowledge? Well, I guess I'll take those one by one. If we talk about fortune, well, let me tell you one thing. I have made more gold in the last, 2 months that I've been in Skyrim than I have in my entire career as a bard before now. So whether or not I seek fortune, it seems to be something that I'm obtaining. I don't think money is something I'm going to have to worry about anytime soon. As for fame, well, I suppose I've always wanted a little bit of fame, just not the sort of fame that I think I'm likely to get now. What I wanted was to become a well-known and respected bard, at least in the area of Bruma County. Now, well, things are going to be a bit different, aren't they? I suppose I need to gather a bit of fame if I'm going to use this gift I've been given in the way that I'm intending. I need people to know who I am and what I do, so that I can gather the support that I need to drive out the Thalmor from Skyrim. And if a few more people hear my songs along the way, well, that's an added bonus. As for power is not something that I've ever really cared for very much. But again, it's something that it seems I'm gaining whether I seek it or not. And knowledge? Yes, knowledge is something that I'm actively seeking. I came here seeking knowledge, even if it wasn't on my own behalf, and I find that the longer I'm here, the more questions I have. I want to know the real story behind a lot of things. perhaps truth is the most valuable treasure that I could obtain. The next question is, do you want a family? I suppose the most honest answer I could give to this question is, I don't know. My mother has made a few noises at me about when am I going to give her grandchildren, but every time she does that, of course I have to push back against it. Still, I don't know if I actively want children and a family of my own, but I don't actively not want it either. I'm just not sure that I'm really great mother material, if you will. I don't know if I have the skills to do that job properly. That responsibility might be even scarier than being Dragonborn. But in any case, it's not something that's on my agenda anytime soon, so perhaps that's a question for me to think about after things have settled down a bit. The next question is, are you devoted to the gods? And yes, I am a worshipper of all 9 divines, though, like anyone who follows the divines, I am closer to some than I am to others. There's Talos, of course, though I sometimes wonder if the worship of Talos had not been outlawed, would I feel quite so attached to him? I can't really say for sure, but I suppose it doesn't really matter, considering that's not the world that we live in, is it? Then there's Arkay, who is probably the divine that I feel the closest attachment to. Dibella, patron of the arts, is always important to any bard, and as a girl who grew up on farms, of course Kinnereth is going to be very important, along with Zenithar. My relationship with Mara, as you know, is a little strained, though my problem is really more with her priests and her other followers than it is with herself. Then Julianos, I do appreciate him because he's responsible for books, and I love books and reading and stories. And of course I am seeking knowledge, but as someone who was never really formally educated, I never had many reasons to devote much of my time and attention and prayer to him. I suppose the 2 of the divines who I have the least attachment to are Stendar and Akatosh. I suppose perhaps I should devote a little bit more attention to him now, considering the whole Dragonborn business, but he's always seemed kind of distant to me. Not a divine that I ever felt I had very much to do with, even if I did always give the usual traditional offerings when it was appropriate. The next question is, do you have a favorite city or village? Well, Bruma, but I'm guessing you actually mean within Skyrim. So I suppose Whiterun is the city that I like the most, because it's the most like home. It's actually very similar in a lot of ways, though I will say that the population there is a bit more homogeneous than what I'm used to at home. Then Windhelm I like because it has such a sense of history and age to it, all of these stories built into the stones, but it's not exactly a very welcoming place. Solitude I really enjoy, but unfortunately I have the distinct feeling that I'm not going to be welcome there for very much longer. The next question is closely related to the last, which is, where are you most comfortable in Skyrim and uncomfortable? This is a pretty easy one. Most comfortable is definitely Whiterun. And the most uncomfortable? Markarth. I hate that place, and I really hope that I never have a reason to go back to that city. Now, the last few questions from Warrior for Christ are getting a little bit, shall we say, heavier. And the first of those is, do you think the Empire spreads propaganda about Alfric and his cause? Honestly, I would expect no less. It would surprise me a great deal if the Empire weren't spreading propaganda. And even if I have found myself on the opposite side, I can't really bring myself to blame them for that. Everything that I've heard about Alfric comes down to how you interpret events. It's all about the story and which version of the story you believe. The Empire's version of the story is that Alfric is hungry for personal power. And this ties right into the next question, which is, do you think Alfric shows any signs of being selfish or racist? Alfric is obviously a man of ambition. He has a great deal of drive and talent for leadership, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, even if you could consider it, in a sense, selfish, because it all comes down to the way that he uses that drive. Because his goal is not to amass power for its own sake. His goal is to amass power so that he can give the people of Skyrim the freedom to choose how they worship and how they live for themselves. As for racism, well, that's a difficult question, in part because it seems like everybody has a different definition and a different idea in their minds of what that means and what that looks like. So I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways. What I have not seen is any personal malice towards individuals based on their race or species. However, what I have seen is a certain tolerance for racism, both subtle and blatant, among those who follow him, and a refusal to crack down on those attitudes and the behaviors that follow from them, as well as a neglect of the citizens of his hold who are not Nords. Now, I don't know if this is due to a lack of awareness, or if it's a matter of political expediency, but either way, this is an area in which in which I intend to use what influence I have to change things and to draw his attention to the problems that are going on under his nose. I would like to persuade him, at the very least, to perhaps delegate some authority to Brunwolf Freewinter to deal with some of these issues, but more than that, to bring representatives of especially the Dunmer and Argonian communities to his court, so that they can have a say in what's happening in Windhelm. In any case, it's a delicate matter, and I understand that Alfric's priority right now is dealing with the war, but I'm sure he can't object to letting somebody else take care of some of the other problems that are going on, so that he doesn't have to divide his attention. That way, everybody benefits. The next question is a little different. What do you think about people being werebeast, gift or curse, and would you become one? I must admit that I don't hold a terribly high opinion of werebeasts in general. I do know that some people consider it a gift, and I suppose I can see the appeal of transformation and being able to live as something else for a while, but I think in most cases it's probably more of a curse than anything else. I suppose theoretically, if someone is a werebeast but they're able to maintain complete control over themselves and their actions, and they avoid hurting people, then, well, I suppose live and let live. But how often does that actually happen? Werebeasts are notoriously inclined to lose control over themselves, and it's not uncommon for someone who's afflicted in this way to not be able to preserve their own will in spite of their best intentions. So I'd like to think that if I met somebody who was a werebeast, I would give them the benefit of the doubt and not assume that they were going to go on a murderous rampage. But it's certainly not something that I would choose for myself. And the last question from Warrior for Christ goes back to politics again. Who do you want on the throne of Skyrim? Elisif, Alfric, or yourself? Well, I can tell you right now that the last person I would want on the throne is myself. Maybe not the last, but can you imagine? It would be terrible. I would not make for a good High Queen. As for who I would want, well, at this point I've thrown in my lot with Ulfric Stormcloak, so I suppose that answers that question. Not that I have anything against Elisif, though. I know a lot of people look down on her, but they don't seem to realize that she actually does have a brain. She just wasn't raised with the skills that it would take to rule. She's having to learn on the job, as it were, and she has a lot of influences around her trying to take control from her and lead her, rather than letting her make her own decisions. If it weren't for the war, I think she would come into her own eventually, given enough time and support. But unfortunately, for her and for the rest of us, the deck is stacked against her, and she's not really the person that we need ruling Skyrim right now. Then again, if not for the war, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think Ulfric would necessarily be my first choice either. He's who we need right now, but under other circumstances, I would say maybe Jarl Balgruuf would make a good High King. Not that he would thank me for saying so. The next couple of questions come from sanguinelynx, and they're very closely related, so I think I'm going to answer them together. The questions are, first, does Edda think Alfric would be able to reunify the Empire if he wins the rebellion? And does she think either side has a chance to stave off a future Thalmor advance? Now, the problem with the first question is that Alfric's goal is to liberate Skyrim, not to rebuild the Empire. Though I suppose if anyone were going to do it, Alfric might be the one. Still, that's not the purpose behind all of this. What needs to happen after this war is won is not empire building, but alliance building. And the first alliance has to be with Hammerfell. Hammerfell has held off the Thalmor for nearly 30 years, and they would be the strongest allies we can get right now. Once Skyrim is free, the only province that the Empire will have left outside of Cyrodiil is going to be High Rock. But without Skyrim, High Rock will no longer be connected to Cyrodiil by land. So once Skyrim is free, I have the feeling that High Rock is also going to be free pretty shortly afterwards, which means they're the next people to make an alliance with, either as a whole or through treaties with the individual kingdoms. After that is probably Morrowind. Although they don't have as much of a direct conflict with the Thalmor, I'm fairly certain that they would not be pleased with the idea of the Aldmeri Dominion spreading any further than it already has. Now, I don't think that we would have very much luck trying to form an alliance with Blackmarsh, unfortunately. Their current government, as far as I can tell, is very isolationist, and not terribly interested in getting involved with the other provinces. On top of that, historically, Blackmarsh has been notoriously difficult to conquer, so they're probably not too worried about any Thalmor incursions. So I highly doubt they would have any interest in joining any alliances. However, what alliances are possible, we should start building as soon as we can, because I can guarantee you that once Cyrodiil is on its own, the Thalmor are going to see that opportunity and they're going to swoop in to invade as soon as they get the chance. So this is going to be the hard part for a lot of people, but we're going to have to be ready to set aside all of our grievances from this war and be ready to step in and defend Cyrodiil against invasion when that time comes. Because even if they are the people that we're fighting now, they are not our true enemies. The real enemy is the Thalmor, so the rest of us, as hard as it may be, are going to have to be willing to reconcile our differences and stand together as equals if we want to have any chance of standing against them. The next question comes from Andreas Martonosy, who asks, "What are your feelings about Riki and Alfric? They are the leaders of the respective sides of the Civil War." Well, technically, General Tullius is the leader of the Imperial forces here in Skyrim, but I think I understand what you're getting at. Tullius is an outsider. He's here because he was assigned here, while Riki is here because this is her home. In any case, this is a bit of a difficult question for me to answer because most of what I feel about both of them is filtered in a way through what I think and feel about my mother. They are both people that my mother once called friends. In fact, they both called each other friends once, and I can see why they all might have gotten along in the past, even if those relationships are broken now. In a way, it seems like Mother stands somewhere between the two of them. Take large parts of Riki's personality, mix it in with some of Alfric's intensity, and then add a dash of wry humor, and you basically have my mother. But taken on their own merits, I suppose Riki is in many ways a more approachable type of person. She seems a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more reachable. However, that does not mean she's someone that anyone should underestimate. And I sincerely hope that I will never have to face her directly on the battlefield. For one, because I like her, and I don't relish the thought of being enemies, even if that's what we have to be right now. But I also have the distinct feeling that if I ever had to face her alone, I would be dead in about 20 seconds, if that. Alfric, on the other hand, he really is like someone out of a legend. It's intimidating to be in his presence. I always feel nervous when I approach him. But still, he makes me feel like I want to be something greater than I am. Which is not exactly a comfortable feeling, but it does inspire me to take action where otherwise I might have stood by and done nothing. Still, having met the both of them, I can understand why Mother would have had such a hard time making a decision that she sent me, of all people, to get a fresh perspective on the situation. Now, the final question, both for today and for this interview as a whole, comes from Ranger Ghost, who asks, "How does Edda feel about being Dragonborn? And how does she feel about Skyrim being her new home?" Well, I can tell you that I'm still not happy about this whole Dragonborn business. If the gods truly needed somebody to fulfill whatever role they have in mind for the Dragonborn, surely they could have found somebody better equipped than me. But since I'm the one who stuck with it, that means I'm the one who's going to have to serve the gods and whatever their purpose is as best I can. That is assuming I can interpret what it actually is they want from me, but I think I'm starting to get an idea of what that could possibly be. Of course, if they don't want me opposing the Thalmor, then they definitely chose the wrong person at the wrong time. As for Skyrim being my home, I'm not sure I'm ready to accept that quite yet. After all, even if I'm stuck here, even if I can never go back, Bruma is still my home. And who's to say that I'll actually settle down in Skyrim after all said and done? I mean, I have something that I need to do here now, but that doesn't mean that I have to stay here forever. I have the possibility of going to Hammerfell next, so who knows, maybe that will end up being my home someday. Still, I'm not ruling out the possibility that I may eventually come to consider Skyrim my home. It's just that right now is too soon, and I'm not ready to say that yet. So I suppose that's it. Those were the last of the questions presented to me. I have to say, this has been a strange experience, knowing that you've all been watching me, and speaking to all of you about, and speaking with you all about so many things. But it has also been good to have this chance to share my thoughts on all of this. So thank you for being here with me and for listening to me ramble. And thank you, strange as it is, for staying by my side through this journey. I pray that the Divines will stay with you on yours.